Dr. Thembinkosi Dlaza, Biological and Environmental Sciences Lecturer at the Walter Sisulu University and the Principal Investigator of the laboratory, joins us now. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Just talk to us about, this initiative and, of course, its impact and significance on marine research in the country. All right, so if you can unmute your mic.
Sorry, technology gets the best of us sometimes. I was saying good afternoon to you and the viewers as well. Thank you for the question. I think the most important thing is when you look in terms of impact that this particular project is going to do on science, is that normally our science that we're conducting specifically on this region of the Wild Coast tended to be more about observational or fact-finding. And then this particular lab, what it will then do, it will allow us then to do, problem-solving type of research, whereby the problems that we have managed to identify over the years will be then possible to be answered through this particular laboratory. So that is just one of the impacts that I think from a scientific perspective, or marine scientific perspective, this particular lab will do. And then again, considering that the Walter Sisulu University itself is an African university, which then prides itself in terms of dealing with societal issues, this particular lab, as far as Walter Sisulu University is concerned now, it will be actually really talking to the mission and vision of the university and ensuring that the university has got an impact into the society that surrounds it.
Now, just in as far as this initiative is concerned, I mean, how does climate change impacts marine life?
Okay. Normally, you know that what climate change will do then in terms of marine life, it will actually first increase the temperatures or the sea surface water temperatures, which basically means then that species that are normally confined to cold temperatures will not be able to survive. So they will either have to retreat further down to areas that are cold, or will have to then, if they cannot survive or adapt, then they will have to really just be wiped off. And then on the opposite end, the species that are normally in tropical or subtropical regions, in warm regions, will start increasing their habitat occupancy, meaning that they will start encroaching in areas that were normally cold before. So now that is very critical because it means then that in some areas, some species might disappear. And then if then you're not aware or you're not ready to deal with those kinds of things, then you would be caught wanting in a sense because you haven't done your research, you haven't done mitigation measures to make sure that the species that were supposed to be used as indicator species were identified. So this particular lab, then what it will do, it will allow us that opportunity to really target or find species that can be, used as model, as sentinel, to show us how the impact of climate change is happening in the coast. So there's quite a lot of factors that will happen, or a lot of changes that will happen in the ocean as a result of climate change. Sea surface rise, habitat destruction, there's quite a lot. But the most important one at the moment is sea surface temperature increases.
I want you to elaborate a little bit more about just how the lab is going to be able to focus on addressing food and security and, of course, adaptation to climate change, as you've been talking about in terms of climate change. Just talk to us about, how that will then be achieved and, of course, the relationship between food security and climate change.
Okay. Mthatha is basically found along the Wild Coast, and the Wild Coast in South Africa is the poorest of the poor. It's very rural. You don't have proper sanitation systems, you don't have proper roads, and the more you get closer to the ocean, the worse the roads become. So unemployment rates are very high, illiterate levels are very high, so in areas like that, then people, what they do, they depend a lot on coastal resources, specifically marine resources on the coastline or on the rocky shores where they can access the ocean and just physically go to the ocean. Okay, that's number one. So now when we're talking about food security and this laboratory, what we have seen over the years is that some of the resources have actually been depleted, or some of the species have actually been depleted, to the point that we've had conflicts between the conservancy agencies along the coastline and the communities that live on coastline. Because, you know, when poverty comes, you know, you suddenly remember that this is your area, this is your land, you've got a right to access this land and access its resources, but then they have to be managed. And then in this way, then when we have this particular lab, what it will then do, it will save in terms of increasing those resources through aquaculture. So when we do aquaculture, basically it means we take species, or we go and collect species or specimen from the ocean, bring them into the lab, culture them or farm them in layman's words. We farm them such that we increase the yield, we increase the numbers, we increase the body size, and then after that, whatever product we get, since this is not going to be a commercial laboratory, the offsprings that we get from the lab, we then take them back to the ocean to ensure that the species that were depleted or the resources that have been overexploited, they get to recover by us reseeding some of the species back into the ocean, and therefore the community can directly then go and collect the species from the ocean without having to fear that they might not get anything. So that's now the food security part. Now, when we come to the climate change and how climate change then is interrelated with food security, when you look, for instance, at the moment, as I've just said, that some of the species will have to migrate, or some of the species will have to just not be there because they will not be able to adapt to these changes in climate, in terms of climate. Therefore, then, if you then don't have means of how to make people adapt to those changes, or how to make people switch from their normal utilization of the ocean, then will be caught wanting. The idea then is that when you then introduce aquaculture through small-scale fishing cooperatives, then what that does then, it reduces the pressure from the ocean, and in a way, it kind of controls the environmental conditions in which the species then can be grown, so that they don't necessarily have to go through these new developments in terms of climate change.